Hello, this is Mr. Hornsby 83. This is the Mr. Hornsby 83 show. And before I start tonight's video, which I'll say the title on that once I say this. Warning, this video is not for kids under the age of 13. So there we go. We did that whole nonsense, which is something we've had to do since early this year. Anyway, tonight I'm going to be covering the Viceland Dark Side of Pro Wrestling documentary that covered the Chris Benoit story. And one of the big things I took from this is it seemed like Benoit started really snapping and going crazy with the way they were talking. Started snapping and kind of starting to go crazy after Eddie Guerrero passed. Now, I understand the importance of a really close friend and all that, but Jesus Christ. I got friends that I love like brothers, but yeah, and it wouldn't cause me to go complete. I'd be very devastated if they passed, but them pretty much, I wouldn't go into a complete madness mode over it, but it is what it is. But sometimes, something like that, a big freaking loss like that can cause you to go crazy, so yeah. But I'm going to talk about some of the key points. They mostly talked about, when Chris first, met Eddie Guerrero, and then when he met, all of his friends like Dean Malenko and all that. How they worked together and all that. And then they covered how he met Nancy and, talked about Nancy, how her career started and all that stuff. And I thought they did a really good job covering this whole story. Now, the big reveal at the end of the video, at the end of the documentary was them talking about the steroid thing, and then, Vince McMahon pretty much saying, if it was roid rage, he wouldn't have carefully planned things out and been able to sit Bibles in that down. And we find out the big reveal was, what was it called, CTD or something like that? Yeah. CTE, yeah. But, overall, I thought it was a good documentary. I felt like at the beginning of the documentary, everybody was, all of Benoit's friends and all that were kind of talking good about him at the beginning. But then toward the end, they all started kind of bashing, which I guess he deserves because of what he did. You don't do something like that and not expect your friends to bash you for it. Honestly, if, I had a friend that did that to his family and then took his own life, I'd probably flat out call him a coward because he didn't keep himself alive to suffer the consequences of what happened. But, this concussion thing, and this is why WWE started really taking their concussion policy more serious and started taking, the whole steroid drug testing serious in their company and testing their wrestlers for it. Which, it was very, one of the key things they said after Eddie died is like Benoit was grieving him like he was a spouse of Eddie Guerrero, which, I guess that's kind of thing. I guess that's kind of normal, but I don't want to talk too much about it, but it was a very good documentary. It was a very heartbreaking documentary, and it really shed a lot of light on how bad this concussion stuff could be if it's not treated. And Chris Nowinski, the guy who played the Harvard kid, even though he really went to Harvard and played a cocky, arrogant Harvard kid, he's the one that studied Benoit's brain and found it, and that kind of ended the whole speculation of it was the steroids thing, which, makes sense, because if you flip out and do something in roid rage, you're not going to carefully plan it out. You're going to do it, and then you're going to, once you snap out of it, you're going to see what happened and go crazy. Now, maybe it could have been a combination of the roid rage and the freaking, concussion symptoms he had, but, it could have been a combination of both those things, But yeah, to solely blame steroids on it, it's kind of crazy. I didn't even think Benoit did steroids because really Benoit wasn't really super jacked. He didn't really get super jacked until he went to WWE. I mean, yeah, he was a pretty good size when he was in WCW, but he wasn't super jacked. So, but they said apparently he was doing the steroids since high school, which was kind of a crazy thing because doing steroids for a lot of years could freaking cause you to go crazy. And I've worked out for years, and I would never resort to steroids. I mean, yeah, no matter how desperate I get, I will not resort to steroids. I will find other ways to, get where I want to get as far as muscle wise and weight loss wise and all that stuff. But, a lot of the other key things they talked about it, like I said, talked about how it was like Benoit was like very emotional. Talked about how Nancy, was looking out for Vicky after Eddie died, and she was there every night, checking on her, doing stuff for her. It got to the point to where she had to get, Vicky out of bed and throw her into her shower to get her to start getting up and doing stuff. And she said she appreciated what Nancy did. And, it's, and then David Benoit started talking about all the stuff he dealt with, and he talked about how, pretty much WWE and all of them, pretty much left him in the dark. The only people that really reached out to him afterwards was Jericho and Chavo after this all happened. Everybody else just said forget. JR talked about when he went to the funeral to represent WWE, or at the time WWF. No, actually it was WWE, yeah. He talked about how he got, yelled at by Nancy's sister, which she was a big part of the documentary, and, I don't know who it was that told her sister that, that Benoit's other kids didn't want nothing to do with that family no more and didn't want to see them, and that they told them, it might have been Benoit's parents, more than likely probably his dad or maybe even his mom, but, telling them that was pretty cold-hearted of them, because David said he still loved, Nancy's sister and all that as his aunt, and, when they finally did reconnect, when Jericho reconnected them, they were happy to see each other, and they stayed in touch since then. I mean, even at the end, when Benoit's, David's giving his final thoughts on the whole situation, he starts breaking down crying, and Chavo's there, he's patting him on the shoulder, and then, Nancy's sister was there hugging him and said, we need this and all that. He's like, yeah, I know, but it's tough, and, it is tough when you lose, parents, rather it was a step parent or not. He said, Nancy never used the word step with him. She called him her son. And, and that's a habit I've gotten into lately. I mean, years ago, I probably wouldn't have used the term step, but I do use step for some of my step brothers and sisters and, my stepfather and all that. But, years ago, I probably wouldn't have used that term. But, overall, though, a good documentary. I think they covered everything pretty well, and they talked about how, how Benoit idolized Dynamite Kid. This pretty much some of the stuff was stuff we already knew. And, everybody was talking about how shocked they were when they found out that Benoit did this, because at first they were just, grieving, all three of them, because they thought something else happened. But then when they found out Benoit did everything, they were like, everybody started being real, talking a little bad about Benoit, even the close friends, but they weren't saying too much bad about Benoit. And, but mostly some of the WWE officials that were on it, like JR and that, even though JR said he was a real close friend with Benoit, and he, he was shocked, they were stunned at night all and all that, but, it's just a good documentary. If you get a chance, go. If you got Viceland TV, go on demand, check it out. They did part 1 and part 2. Next week they'll be covering New Jack. I probably won't be covering that one. I just want to cover the Benoit one because that's like one of the biggest wrestling stories we've had in years. I mean, there hasn't been that many big wrestling stories in since that Benoit tragedy. But yeah, we've had some old wrestlers that wrestled back in the day pass away in that, but that's because of age and all the hard life that they had as a wrestler. When we were watching them being entertained by them as kids, no matter what era you grew up in watching these guys. Some of these guys lived longer than they were probably expected to live. Like, certain guys that were still alive. I can't think of all of them, but you know how that is. But yeah, and sorry if it felt a little, random, and I was felt like I was going all over the place with this thing, but it's been a long, busy, crazy, tiring day. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I think it was a good documentary. I think it really brought to life some things that need to be brought to life about, the whole Benoit tragedy. I feel like the way freaking his son was treated after that happened, he shouldn't have been the one getting treated bad. It wasn't him that did this stuff. Can't suffer for the sins of what your father did. You can only freaking try to learn from the mistakes your father made and be a better person than what your father ended up being. Now, yeah, initially a lot of people still say he was still one of the nicest guys ever, and that's why some of the people said they were still shocked and all that it was him that did this to Nancy and his youngest son. But, you can't blame David for, the sins of his father. I mean, that's just crazy. That'd be like, someone blaming me. No offense to my dad. That'd be like someone blaming me for the sins of what my father did. Either one of my fathers. Rather it be my biological father or my stepfather. But, you can't blame him for that. All you can do is learn from the mistakes that he made and try to be a better person and be a better person for it. But, overall, a sad, tragic story about this, and it was just crazy. And, I didn't realize how long Woman had been around, because I always know her as Woman in WCW. But then when I watched some old ECW stuff, I also seen that she managed Sandman in ECW, but I didn't realize she was around as long as she was. But I thought she didn't show up till mid-90s. But apparently she's been around since late 80s as a manager. But, yeah. Overall, what did you guys think of the documentary? Do you think they covered everything well? Do you think, they still are covering up some things that they're trying to hide? Like one of the things I kind of feel like they were still covering up mode things with was, the After Dark show where they had Tommy Dreamer Chavo on. And Tommy Dreamer said something that sounded like he was paid to say it because he's not a part of WWE anymore. And this, I don't know. But yeah. And I know a lot of people think, Kevin Sullivan, was behind it. And I'm like, that's crazy. That's nonsense. The freaking concussion situation he had mixed in with the roids he was doing, which I think was testosterone or something. That's what caused him. And then coped with the freaking death of one of his closest friends, Eddie Guerrero. Caused him to snap. But, overall, and they talked about the Hall of Fame thing, and, Jericho probably said it the best when he talked about the Hall of Fame. He said, he'd be heartbroken to realize his legacy was tarnished because of what he did, and his Hall of Fame career wouldn't be what it was because of his passion for wrestling and all that. But, when you do stuff like that, it's just crazy. No matter what the reasons were, it's still crazy. Especially taking the life of your own kid. I don't see how anybody can do that, no matter if you're not in your right mind or not. That's one thing you should freaking think about, And, I was a big fan of Benoit as a wrestler, but as a person, and I've said this ever since the freaking murder, because I know my friend Eugene, he, met Benoit once. He said he was a real nice guy when he met him, when they still had Gold's Gym in Erlanger, when Gene was working out a lot. But, he said he was a good person, but, I could still respect Benoit as a wrestler. But as a person, and, maybe my judgment might have leaned a little bit after watching this documentary, but, at first I'm like, well, he's a lowlife as a person for doing that to his wife and kid. But, I kind of understand that stuff like that happens when you get symptoms like that and you go crazy like that and you lose a close, a close friend, family member, whatever. It can do something to you. I mean, I'll be honest with you, sometimes I still feel like I'm going down that path, but then I realize, I would never go as far as Benoit did, after losing my mom. Sometimes I feel like, I'm gonna freaking, sometimes I feel like I am going insane, and, a lot of my emotions I had in 2018 and last year reflected in that, and, it happens, and, but like I said, I wouldn't go as far as Benoit would. But then again, I didn't wrestle most of my life, and freaking, I had a dream to be a wrestler. And then when I hear stuff like this, stories like this, what happened with Benoit and that, and the Eddie Guerrero situation, and other situations that's happened in previous, like that's called some of these other wrestlers that I grew up watching passing, like a Davey Boy Smith and that, I'm kind of glad I didn't follow through with becoming a professional wrestler. Because I had two dreams as a kid. One was to be a big-time action movie star, but look at where the state of action is now. The biggest action movies we got coming out now, they're either from the pages of a comic book or they're a Fast and Furious movie. But, I'm glad I didn't go through with that dream. And then even several years ago when I was back into lifting, I was thinking about getting back into wrestling, but, even hearing the story of the guy that was running that wrestling promotion, how, how had he not found God in that, he probably would have been in a situation like Benoit or something, and then founded this Christian wrestling entertainment show. I'm sure, John, you know who I'm talking about, the Jaden guy.
Yep.
But, yeah. So when I hear stuff like that, I'm kind of glad I didn't follow through with that dream. But I've had a number of dreams throughout my life, but those were the two main ones I had, was either a big-time action movie star or, or a pro wrestler. That's probably one of the reasons why I still watch wrestling today. Because that's how much I cared about wrestling as a kid. But, when stuff like this happens, it's kind of, a situation like that. But anyway, I've rambled on enough. Well, end this one. It's probably about, how long has this been, John?
Too long.
Probably about 20 minutes or so.
Almost 20.
Almost 20 minutes. Yeah, I'm going to end this one. Tomorrow I will do my video on the action movie dream matches we got in action movies. I'm doing mostly 80 and 90s action movies that, had dream matches such as, maybe Demolition Man, maybe Universal Soldiers. A couple other movies that had some dream match, or I guess you say dream fight in action movies. But that'll do it. Catch you guys later, and peace out. Push the stop on that.
Peace.